Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. I am an acupuncturist, a dating coach, an energy interventionist, a guy just trying to live a good life out here. And today's episode is a heavy one. So if you want a lighthearted pick-me-up, this is probably not the episode to listen to. But, I want to be really real and honest with you guys. And so without any further ado, let's just dive right in. So as some of you know, I've moved from New York to Miami, back to Miami. And that's why I missed the podcast last week, but I'm excited to be here with you today. Though I wish I was recording something else. I had all these plans to record new things on relationships and attachments and energy and all that stuff. And, well, you know what they say, that life is what happens when you're making other plans. I got the news the other day that my dog died. She was murdered, actually. And it's been devastating. Her name was Kola, which is a Lakota word for friend, and it's spelled Kola. I found out later it meant male friend, but, whatever. Whoops. And I got her my 30th birthday. I never had any real pets growing up, and never had a dog. We didn't have like a family dog when I was a kid. My sister was allergic, and my dad said no hobbies that eat. And so for my 30th birthday, I said, I'm gonna get myself a dog. And I found Kola. I'd always wanted a husky, but I was living in Miami at the time, and it seemed kind of unusual to get a husky in Miami. But I kept noticing them. I was seeing other people walk their huskies on the beach and down here, and I did my research. I was asking around, and everybody was saying the same thing, which was like, if they're born here, if that's what they're used to, it's not that bad for them. They do all right. And so I went with that information that I had, and I found Kola. And so I got her right around my birthday. She was 4 months old, and she was a brown and white husky with these amazing light blue eyes that would rival, the Ice King from Game of Thrones. And it was quite an experience for both of us. She was my first dog, and she was crazy. She was a wild puppy. And, shortly after I brought her home, I was working on potty training her, and she started having some bowel distress, and she was pooping on the pee pads, in the house, and she was pooping blood. And I remember tearing up a little bit because, I used to have ulcerative colitis, and I had blood in my stool every day for such a long time. And I had finally kind of turned the corner from that. And here I adopt this little puppy, and, she's got blood in her stool. And I was like, oh my God, did I, is this my karma to like take care of a dog who has this, same kind of thing? Or, how did I manifest this? Or is she carrying this burden for me? And, my head was just going in all these different directions. And it turns out she had like some kind of parasite or something. We got her some medicine, and she was totally fine. But I was like seeing myself in her already, so it was a bond that started pretty quickly. And one of the most remarkable experiences that I ever had with her was I was with the woman that I would marry when I adopted her, and so she was there in those beginning years. And Kola never cared much for Alex. It wasn't that she didn't like her, but she definitely had a strong affinity for me. But when Alex got pregnant, before we actually knew that she was pregnant, I mean, I had a feeling and an intuition and a vision. I'd seen some stuff. I remember we went to the dog park, and normally Kola would just take off in the dog park and couldn't care less about Alex, certainly, and also myself too at the dog park. And this one time, we're looking back, Alex was pregnant, but we didn't know it yet. Kola stayed by Alex's side, and when Kola would take off, if another dog came by Alex, Kola just ran right there, scaring off the other dog, and was hyper protective. It was one of those things that, you know, I guess I would have believed it if I hadn't seen it, but seeing that, you know, I had the feeling that she was pregnant, but we didn't know for sure. And then all of a sudden seeing this dramatic shift in Kola's behavior was something else. And then I remember when Wyatt was born and we brought him home from the birthing center, Kola was there, and she rose up and, you know, she sniffed him. She sniffed him, and she was there. She was there from day one, even before day one. I guess it depends on how you define day one. That's a separate conversation. And she was great. You know, we'd do all the things that happen with dogs. And, you know, all of this was new to me. I didn't grow up with dogs. So, you know, just those walks on the beach and playing in the park, and she would take her water bowl and she would splash the water underneath her in the house, you know, to cool herself off. And, you know, we were living in a tiny apartment, and at some point with Wyatt and, you know, Alex doing the mom thing, taking care of him, and I was working, trying to provide for the family, it just got to be, a lot with this big dog in a tiny little apartment. And so Alex had another husky that was living with her parents, who was a couple years older than Kola, and her parents graciously agreed to take Kola to Chicago with them. And so I flew her up, and there she got a taste of cool weather and a yard, you know, like an acre or so to run around on, and she was free. And it was so beautiful and surprising. It shouldn't be surprising, but, you know, she just had this extra life in her. And that's where I realized, like, huskies definitely don't belong in Miami. It seems obvious now, but talking to the other husky owners, you know, it's just like, well, have you ever seen your dog in cold weather? I think you can see that there is a dramatic difference. And so Kola's been in Chicago. She's been in Chicago ever since. And my ex-father-in-law was raising chickens, and one time she got in the chicken coop and, you know, unfortunately had her way with a few chickens there. But she was, aside from chickens, just such a gentle, wonderful dog. She brought life to the older husky, and, you know, by annoying the ever-loving crap out of him and eventually becoming the dominant one of the pair. And she was there. And then, you know, when I was in New York and going through the divorce, every time I'd come back to see Wyatt, you know, she would greet me. She'd see me coming in and she'd walk a little closer. And then as soon as she knew it was me, she would jump up and down and run back and forth and just be so excited. And those times that I spent the night there, you know, she would sleep curled up by my head, and it was just an amazing thing to be recognized, even though I wasn't there every day anymore, you know, after the first like 3 or 4 years with her, you know, and they were taking good care of her. And, you know, and then her family, you know, they moved to Indiana last summer, to the kind of near the border of Illinois and Indiana. And before we'd gotten the electric fence set up, you know, she was getting loose. She was running around, and she had a run-in with some of the neighbors' chickens, and it was a different situation because there's parts of Indiana where they are. It's like where they are is an interesting place because there's this mass exodus that's happening from Chicago. The taxes are crazy, and everything's getting really crowded, and there's a lot of violence in the city. And so there's a lot of people that are moving to these parts of Indiana where the school districts are good, and, you know, there's opportunities. You can get bigger homes, you get more for your money, all the stuff. And so there's this interesting mix now of kind of Chicago, highly educated, you know, city folk, if you will, that are now going and moving in to these areas that used to just be really kind of Hickville. And, you know, this neighbor had made some threats about, if Kola was on their property again, he would take care of it. So, we did what we could. We got the electric fence. We hired trainers, did all the things. And, Alex and her sister and her family did such a good job with Kola. And once we got that under control, all year she was fine. She stayed on the property and she was great. And then a few days ago, she jumped the line. Well, before we get there, it was maybe, a month ago, Wyatt had the flu. And Kola, as huskies can be kind of aloof sometimes, but Kola came in and he had a super high fever, about 104. He was throwing up. He didn't feel good, and he was sleeping a lot. And she laid on the floor next to the bed, keeping vigil. Again, the Game of Thrones, it reminds me of, the dire wolf by Bran's side. She kept vigil. And then when he felt better and he was going out and swinging, she'd go out there with him. And, as an only child, she's a big part of his life, and they'd take him for walks. And Wyatt and his aunt would go around the block and they'd walk by this neighbor's house. And, the neighbor, I guess, would wave and, he'd see Kola with Wyatt and, the whole thing. And then, a couple days ago, Kola, I guess, got free and just ran all over town. The whole neighborhood was out looking for her. And I think she might have killed one of the chickens and, God knows what else she killed in the woods and whatever. And, but the neighbor, the wife anyway, from what I heard was okay with it. We apologized, made reparations and thought that was the end of it. And, the next day, Kola got out again and she, went back over to the property with the chickens. And there the owner, the husband, I guess, was out there in a van drinking with his buddy. And rather than trying to break it up peacefully, making a loud noise, separating Kola, anything, shooting a shotgun into the air, he fired 3 shots. Killed her on sight. And it's one of those things where I'm really blessed in my life. I'm really blessed. I don't think that I've ever been on the receiving end of just outright cruel behavior. And turning 40 in a couple of months, that's a pretty remarkable and blessed place to be. There's a saying that says, hurt people hurt people. I don't know how we would modify that for somebody who is cruel to animals. Especially pets that belong to little children in the neighborhood where where they belong. Where the dog belongs, where it should be. So I've been challenged the last few days to harness all of the things that I talk about, practicing forgiveness, coming back to the heart. Wondering why, how. And just knowing that the man that did this is suffering. And apparently after it happened, some neighbors came out. I haven't been there, but some neighbors came out and all had stories about how they've seen him be cruel to animals, and whether or not the authorities have gotten involved, I don't know. But apparently this guy has a reputation. So what do you do? what do you do? There's stories that I've heard over the years in the Lakota tradition. I'm not going to get the Native American tradition anyway. I'm not going to get the details right, but the variations of the story all kind of point to the similar thing, which is that way back in the day, the animal kingdom was upset with man because man was destroying the earth and not being good stewards. And so the animal kingdom wanted to separate from man. They wanted to pull away, leave him alone and isolated, and then maybe that would be the end of mankind. And so at the council fire where all the animals gathered to basically cast the vote, to leave man by himself, it was only the dog who said that it would go with man and try to bring man back to the sacred fire by being a faithful companion, loving, and that maybe with a friend, man could come back and be in good nature with the earth and with all of his relations. So sorry for this episode being a bit of a fucking bummer. But, fuck. If you've got a fur baby, pull him or her close to you. Squeeze them extra tight. Be thankful for the moments that we've got. And let's just try to be nicer. And maybe we can end this cruelty. Because people are suffering. They're suffering. So squeeze your babies tight. Send a little love out. And, thanks for being here. Thank you. I'll catch you next time. Rest in peace, Kola.